On the right wing, there's a growing chorus that identifies workforce participation and the dropping out of the workforce as the great silent scourge of the socialist era of President Barack Hussein Obama. To these folks, basically what Obama's America looks like is that under the cover of existing programs, people have been moving from the workforce into the social safety net in the form of Social Security insurance and Social Security disability insurance.
The administration has made dependency a watchword of its administration, and therefore they have reduced the standards for people.
So it's easier to get disability? Is it really?
It is much easier.
A lot of men, 25, 26 years old, sitting on a porch all day long because every two weeks they get a crazy check, and they're on disability.
In the Baltimore Sun on Wednesday, Jonah Goldberg wrote, as the nature of the economy changes, disability programs are sometimes taking the place of welfare for those who feel locked out of the workforce. In the last few weeks, a remarkable thing happened. So this right-wing meme, which is all the rage and the reason the Drudge Report went with its headline, jumped the species barrier into the mainstream media. The very highly respected NPR's Planet Money even did a long piece about people dropping out of the workforce and into disability. Quoting from the Planet Money piece, and this will ring a bell, disability has also become a de facto welfare program for people without a lot of education or job skills, but it wasn't supposed to serve this purpose. It's not a retraining program designed to get people back onto their feet. That piece has sparked a huge controversy as we enter budget season and Washington contemplates so-called entitlement reform. The stakes are very high, so much so, in fact, that 8 former commissioners of the Social Security Administration wrote a detailed open letter to NPR to express their concerns with the report, stating, quote, as former commissioners of the agency, we could not sit on the sidelines and witness this one perspective on the disability programs threaten to pull the rug out from under millions of people with severe disabilities. Drastic changes to these programs will lead to drastic consequences for some of America's most vulnerable people. And drastic changes to Social Security disability program is exactly what the Drudge Report readers want. Joining me tonight from Newton, Massachusetts is Michael Astrue, former Social Security Commissioner under Presidents Bush and Obama. And at the table, Rebecca Vallis, attorney and disability advocate with Community Legal Services in Philadelphia, and Avik Roy, senior fellow at Manhattan Institute for Policy Research. I should say we invited reporter Hannah Jeffy-Walt and producer Alex Bloomberg from NPR's Planet Money to join us tonight. They were unavailable, but have expressed interest in coming on in the future. All right, Michael, I guess I'll begin with you. Why did you decide to write this letter?
Well, we decided to write this letter because the factual premise of the NPR article is just not true. They use loaded terms like skyrocketing, basically told the American people that there's some unexpected, sudden change in disability policy. And it's not true. You read the trustees' reports for the last 20 years, we've been saying since 1994 that there's going to be a solvency issue in the Disability Trust Fund in 2016, and that's exactly what's going to happen. So it's a little bit like saying daylight is skyrocketing in April. It's not skyrocketing. It's changing because of things that we understand, and the same thing is true in disability.
Well, but there are, I mean, when you go through, when you listen to the piece, when you read the article, there are a bunch of eye-popping statistics about how much it's expanded, right? It's was it tripled since 1980 and doubled since 1995 in terms of the amount of people that are on disability, right? There are more people on it now. That, I understand why people think that's worrying. There's also statistics about the degree to which people, once they go on to disability, can get back into the labor force, right? So that's another concern. And then the third thing that I found persuasive about the piece, or at least not persuasive but provocative, was the idea that the people, the diagnoses that are expanding in disability are those that seem the most nebulous about things like chronic pain, not that people don't have chronic pain or psychological conditions, as opposed to, you know, broken legs from factory incidents, etc. Is that persuasive to you, Avik?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say a couple of things. One, in terms of the demographic argument. So 2 economists for the National Bureau of Economic Research calculated this, and they found that 15% of the growth in disabilities participation for men was demographics, aging of the population. For women, it was only 4%. So there's a substantial amount that's not demographically driven. A Senate investigation found that as much as 25% of the participation in the program could be waste. Now, we don't know the exact number, and I'm sure that Mike has his own estimate of what the number is. But to say that there's one thing, that the statutory provision or criteria of what what makes someone eligible. And then there's the actual enforcement and application. Just because a letter of the law says something doesn't mean that there aren't people who are being certified as disabled who really aren't.
So here's, Michael, I want to go to you on this, right? So the question is, what's driving the expansion of people with disability? And one big question is, as a population ages, we expect more people to file for disability because people who are older are more likely. And the question is, what percentage of this big change we're seeing is driven by that?
Okay, so I concede there are a couple economists out there, and I have a suspicion of whose payroll they're on, that have been mischaracterizing the numbers systematically. But you just have to go to the trustees' report. We cover this every single year. How much of the change is due to what? And you can go back for 20 years. It has hardly changed at all. It's exactly as it was predicted the last time Congress legislated in this area in 1994. And it's most of it is simply the baby boomers going through their disability-prone years. Just like we're getting a lot more retirement applications, surprise, surprise, the baby boomers are getting older. It's the exact same thing with disability. You get people a lot sicker at 55 than at 25, and so we get a lot more disability applications.
Mike, but do you believe that there's no waste in the system? What percentage of applications are mistakes or waste or fraud or abuse? What percentage?
Look, you can't have a $150 billion program where, at the end of the day, a lot of the cases require judgment. Mental disabilities, pain. You can't run a blood test. You can't run a genetic test. There is some degree of fraud in the program. Absolutely. Senate committee tried for 5 years to try to show that there was massive fraud, and they couldn't do it. And they ended up distorting our own internal quality statistics on, the quality of the paperwork, instead of being able to show that there was broad fraud. It's under 1% of the cases, and no one's ever been able to show that it's anything different.
So before the break, I was indicating this chart that shows that applications have been really going up for disability, but the awards have gone up a little bit and now ticked down. And Michael, you wanted to make a point about Alice in Wonderland.
Sure. So when I started as commissioner in early 2007...
And you were a Bush appointee, right?
I was a Bush appointee. There was a hysteria about the program, but in the other direction. My third day on the job, most of the Ways and Means Committee screamed at me because, in their view, with the backlogs, and the agency was cruel, it didn't want to approve cases. I had members saying on the record, although that was expunged later, that they believed that we denied all cases and made everyone appeal. So I was getting cream from that perspective. We stuck to the statutory standard, and in fact what happened on my watch is that the percentage of cases that were allowed dropped rather dramatically, both on initial decisions and appeals. And it's not because we did anything terribly differently. We've stuck pretty closely to the statutory standard. It's that we get economically desperate people applying in recessions. But we did not turn the program into a welfare program and allow those cases. We rejected them. And that's why at the appeals level, it's the lowest level of approval since 1978. So how could the whole program be busting loose and turning into a welfare program if our allowance rates have dropped so dramatically?
There's a Hayekian problem here, right? Because when the social...
Explain that.
Wait a minute. Friedrich Hayek won the Nobel Prize for understanding that there was this knowledge problem, that the central government doesn't always have accurate information about what's going on in the hinterlands. And a lot of times, so the Social Security Administration gets these applications and reviews them, but what happens if the physician is misrepresenting the diagnosis to exaggerate it to make someone seem more disabled? And that's what the NPR report showed, right? So Mike just said... Mike just said that the waste, fraud, and abuse in the system was 1%. And it strains...
Less than 1%.
Less than 1%. So I think it strains credulity. If you look at Britain, for example, now Britain's statutory standard is different than ours, but Britain's coalition government did something very interesting recently. They said, well, if you're on social or disability insurance, we're going to give you a physical exam to verify whether or not you're disabled. A third of the people in Britain refused to sign up for the physical exam and were dropped from the program.
Right, but that's not our program.
Let me just finish the point. So of the next group that actually did the physical exam, 55% were determined to be physically able and not disabled at all. Another 25% were determined to be suitable for some work. Now, the Brits are, of course, morally inferior to us, and we don't cheat the way they do. So I understand that the statutory standard is way more rigorous in our country.
I want to give Michael.
But it's conceivable that
I want to give Michael a chance to respond.
Misuse of the system.
Michael.
I mean that's straight out of the Baltimore Sun op-ed piece from this week, and that's crazy talk. The Brits are just getting around to follow what we've been doing for years and trying to do more of. We do what are called continuing disability reviews. We did 435,000 of them my last year as commissioner, and every single year for my 7 fiscal years, I went up to the Congress and asked for a lot more resources to do those, because there's a 10-to-1 return to the taxpayers, and Congress refused to do it. We did more. I pushed it up, and we should do more of those. But we're doing almost 500,000 medical reviews a year. And to have someone in the Baltimore Sun hold up the UK, which is just coming around to copying what we do, I mean, that's crazy talk. Absolute crazy talk.
Rebecca Vallis, attorney and disability advocate, Avik Roy, the Hatton Institute, and Michael Astrue, former Social Security Commissioner. Thank you. That is all in for this evening. The Rachel Maddow Show starts now. Good evening, Rachel.